Good morning. I thank you all for being here. But the reason we are here is serious and alarming. I trust you are aware of recent videos that have circulated capturing the disturbing events that occurred at this McDonald's in the evening hours of November 26, 2023. Those videos depict acts of violence initiated and escalated by McFarland police officers. And it is imperative that we address the issue without delay. While there are various videos circulating, the footage leaves no room for doubt. The actions displayed by those officers are completely unacceptable and must not be tolerated. Rather than address the problem, McFarland PD remains intent on simply trying to brush it under the rug or explain it away. Rather than removing the cancer, they are allowing it to spread and grow. This ultimately has a profound impact, not only on this community, but on the public's impression of law enforcement in general. Not only this department, but the public at large. The excessive force and lack of restraint exhibited during this incident endangers the lives of individuals and undermines the trust we're supposed to be able to place in our law enforcement agencies. What is particularly disheartening is the mob mentality displayed by the officers involved. And I want to take a moment to go and step through what exactly occurred that evening. At 6:21 p.m. on November 26th, Anjanette and Francisco placed their McDonald's order. They still have that receipt to this day. They were standing there waiting for their food, as is reflected in the video, when they were confronted by the officer. The officer standing on the opposite side of the restaurant with a riot gun. What perhaps hasn't been displayed in all the videos circulating is that that officer simply began calling people out. You in the green shirt. You in the red sweatshirt. You in the black hoodie. And as depicted in the video, there was no unrest. There were simply people mid-bite of their food. And as the officer would call them out, similar to Francisco, these kids said, "What? What did I do?" When Francisco attempted to get some explanation from the officer just got louder. Just threatened to detain him. Once they received their food, they went outside. Francisco went outside because the officer kept harassing him. Now, Francisco wasn't running away. Outside, there was a row of 20-plus officers present. He wasn't going anywhere. But what happened is the sergeant rushes out, mows over Anjanette. As she gets up, you can see she is pulled down again by her hair, and you see her head violently strike the cement. There was no resisting. In any of the video we have, there was no resisting depicted. And the only thing Anjanette did after that was plead for Francisco as she watched her fiancé getting beaten. Francisco was on the ground. He was immediately put to the ground when he came out of the restaurant. And immediately the assault commenced. He was pleading for his life. His fiancée was screaming for them to stop. Bystanders were asking for them to stop. And at one point, it seemed like the individual with the stick stopped for an instant. But that was only to turn his violence towards the person recording before he went back after Mr. Joaquin was already on the ground and continued the beating. The primary objective appeared to be to ruthlessly beat Mr. Joaquin, to make an example out of him, and instill fear in the rest of the young crowd that was there. It is deeply troubling that not a single officer present of the 20-plus personnel on the scene showed the courage to intervene, to speak up, to put an end to what was occurring. Even worse, that one officer seemingly threatened another individual that was just witnessing and recording. These videos reveal the stark reality of what transpired that night. They serve as evidence of the urgent need to hold the involved officers and their department accountable. Situations like these tarnish the reputations of the many brave officers who genuinely aspire to serve and protect their communities. I implore you to take immediate action to address this subculture within law enforcement that permits such misconduct. Now is the time for us to work diligently to reinstore the faith of the public in our justice system by ensuring that instances of police brutality are thoroughly investigated and that appropriate consequences are imposed. And only by holding those responsible accountable can we hope to rid law enforcement agencies of this stain. I eagerly anticipate your and the public's help and commitment to rectify this problem in a swift fashion. And I'd like to allow Anjanette just to share a few brief remarks.
Thank you all for being here. On November 26th, 2023, I was afraid I was going to lose my fiancé. While I am happy he is home, we have still lost a piece of him as he struggles to deal with the impact of what happened that day. I am doing my very best to comfort him as he tries to recover from what happened, but I am still trying to recover myself. I am only pleading with all of you that appropriate attention be given to the officer's brutal misconduct so no one else ever gets hurt, and the good officers can continue being good officers rather than be tainted by the inappropriate actions of a few. If this bothers you as much as it has for all who have previously seen the video, I implore you to reach out to your city leaders so that this receives swift and proper attention. Thank you.
Likewise, I thank you guys all for being here. I am thankful that I'm still here because that evening I was not sure that I would be here today. Throughout the multiple blows and shots fired, all I could do was plead for my life and for them to stop. The scary part about it was all the law enforcement present fell upon deaf ears. I was looking for one hero to step up and stop what was going on. Instead, all I heard was my fiance screaming and begging. As I was giving up hope. Likewise, I was giving up hope. I am still recovering from my injuries and have sought counseling to help me deal with the impact of what happened. Please give this the appropriate attention so that no one else has to suffer the way my family has and are still suffering. The attempts of recovering. Thank you.
Ann Jeanette and Francisco are courageous to be here today. And it wasn't easy for them to do that. They're still in fear of even being in this community, even driving past this community down the 99. That's not how it's supposed to be. Our law enforcement officers are meant to serve and protect. And let's applaud those who do so. But let's hold those accountable who put a stain on law enforcement and hurt and damage the public's trust. Thank you.
Will we be able to ask any questions?
Just very briefly. Go ahead.
For those who were saying, of course, this went all over social media, many people got to see it. Many people were saying that, the McFarland PD did find a semi-automatic firearm on Francisco, and he was a threat. What do you say about that?
I think as more facts of this investigation will come out, it will be readily apparent that McFarland PD, as I previously stated, is doing a substandard job of damage control. And that's all it is. The firearm that was recovered was never exhibited and never found until after the beating was imposed on Mr. Joaquin. There was no awareness of it at any time. That's just bootstrapping and going back as the investigation has continued. Anything to attempt to justify what's depicted on that video, but the video is clear. And at no time were those officers in threat of harm. Those officers were doing harm. And not only to these two individuals here, but to this community. And that's unfortunate. And that's why those officers need to be held responsible.
You mentioned that police wanted to make an example out of Francisco. Why do you believe that they wanted to specifically make an example out of him?
Well, unfortunately, it's an old school way of policing. And that is by fear and intimidation. And that's what happened that evening. They had a large group of people, and they attempt to display it in the news and media as there was a mob. But you saw the video. Nobody was approaching the officer, nobody was throwing anything at the officer, nobody was challenging the officer. It was a pure intimidation play that turned to brutality on Mr. Joaquin. And as that is happening, the rest of the individuals that were there watch that, and that sends a message to them of what could happen to them and what they need to watch out, because McFarland PD will put the beat down. That is not the message that law enforcement should be sending.
Have charges been filed? If so, what are your clients and you seeking?
Charges have been filed for resisting arrest. As for Ann Jeanette, you saw the extent of that in the video. There was no resisting. there was a physical assault upon her, twice, by the sergeant. And once the officer came and secured her, there was nothing more except her screaming as to what else she was witnessing. But they've also trounced up charges that you never see before, that you seldom see, that most attorneys would have to go into their deep book to find. Lynching, mobbing. I urge you to look at the video. Was Ann Jeanette lynching and mobbing any officers in that video? No. That's just padding the charges against her. Damage control. Similarly, Francisco, resisting charges. As he's getting beaten, he's pleading for his life. Both hands are on the ground as the officer continues to beat him with the baton. That is not resisting. And the force that was used, even if law enforcement may argue there was some passive resistance, was not necessitated. You had 2 officers on him already. You had another officer walking away. There was no need to continue that beating. It was done to send a message. And then the other items that were found were after the fact. And that's supposed to somehow justify the beating on the video. It doesn't. It does not. You can tell in the video the officer with the baton didn't know what he was doing. Watch it. Watch it again. And watch it again. And watch as he turns. And he's aloof. And then the only thing he can think of in his lack of judgment is to continue beating Francisco. That is wrong.
Are you insinuating that McFarland has poorly trained officers?
It's clear. The video is clear. And every department has an obligation to properly train those officers. Every department does. And every department has an obligation when an incident like this arises to look back at that training.
Francisco denied medical attention at the time. Do we know why?
At the time, he didn't even know if he was going to make it as they were beating him. He just wanted it to stop. And oftentimes in these instances, the last person that you want to entrust with guiding your medical attention is the law enforcement officers that are surrounded around you afterwards trying to urge you to get medical attention. The trust is broken. That's what incidents like this do. They break the public's trust of law enforcement. Thank you.